of the early election, so I didn't know if we had statutory language on. And Jen could answer.
I think I just want to stay kind of. I have those questions too. Is it arbitrary? Is it in statute? Let's just get through a couple more individuals here wanting to speak. I think you brought up some great points. Thanks so much. Then we'll move to the secretary, and perhaps either her or Janet or Spencer at that time can speak to your issue. Representative Larkin, you had a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would just like to take a moment and relate to the Speaker's office and make the suggestion we postpone for. I think this is a very good reason to postpone our floor session at 1:30. I think this should take precedence. Thank you. And also for a couple of people who have testified on the voter suppression bill, let's be clear, that was the Republican legislature that passed that bill. And I think that it would be in the best interest of this body going...
Madam Chair, Mr. Larkin, it's going to be exceedingly difficult for us to actually get to the bottom of what happened if you start to make this about something that we passed that had nothing to do with this election.
Oh, it certainly does.
Madam Chair, finally,
We're going to do it like this. He has the floor, Representative Mesnar has the floor. He has two that points to your comment. When he is done, you can then go back to your original point. At that time, we will presume with continued testimony from the public, since that's, like you pointed out, important. We'll see what the speaker has to say. Your request is noted. Please continue your thought. Let's go.
Madam Chair, Mr. Larkin, I am interested in hearing from the people here, and I'm not interested in grandstanding. I want to get to a solution, and I want to get to a solution quickly. But if this becomes overly political, that will do nobody any good.
Madam Chair, to that point, Mr. Mesnar, I just think it would be worthwhile to basically encourage the voters and the people in the audience who's here today that this legislature is open to have a more progressive election process going forward. And that's what I'm hearing from the people who are supposedly grandstanding.
This is about long polling lines and the presidential preference election that took place March 22nd. With that, we will go to our next individual wishing to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Redeem Robinson, followed by Ann Pyron, and then we'll sneak in there Donna Cox.
Excellent. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm a pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, and this concerns me because our community, I believe our rights to vote have been under attack. This was a planned attack by Helen Purcell, and I think she ought to resign. People are in line for 4 hours. How does that happen? People are hungry. People in the heat. People, older people, standing in line 4 or 5 hours to vote. That's a problem. Helen Purcell, you really ought to resign. I mean, really, you should consider resigning. Also, I believe that we should have an extra day of voting. Extra day of voting. How can we call a winner when there are thousands of people still in line? This is voter suppression at its best. Helen Purcell, please resign.
Is Ann Pyron, followed by Donna Cox.
Ann Pyron here, committee chair, members. I represent the League of Women Voters of the state of Arizona. The League of Women Voters of Arizona believes that all eligible citizens have a right to vote with a responsibility to be informed about the voting process, the issues, and the candidates. However, the primary responsibility for ensuring that the voting process is easily accessible to all, with no barriers to voting, lies with those public officials in charge of elections. This is especially important for individuals who have faced prior patterns of discrimination based on ethnicity, income, or geography, as was covered under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. This section of the Voting Rights Act existed to ensure that no proposed changes in procedures could negatively impact voting rights. The League of Women Voters is a strong proponent of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. On Tuesday, March 22nd, 3 years after Section 5 was declared unconstitutional, the voters in Maricopa County witnessed a very flawed presidential preference election. These flaws could have been prevented if the changes in voting procedures, including reducing the number of polling places from 200 to 60 in the geographically largest county in the United States, had first been reviewed by the Department of Justice. This has been a volatile election season for several months, with many candidates entering and exiting the presidential race. Voters were more likely not to use the early voting ballot because they wanted to see who would left on the ballot on election day. Yes. The fact that non-declared independent voters could not vote in this election unless they registered with the party was a real problem. The most unacceptable part of this election was to see voters waiting up to 5 hours to cast a vote. We must applaud voters for their tenacity. They wanted to vote and see their vote count. Should consider making this presidential preference election a true open primary that allows all voters to vote. The voting is a right for all eligible voters, but the responsibility for the process of voting belongs not only to the voters, but also to our government, which we entrust to carry out this most valued of democratic processes.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Problems seen during this presidential preference election should not happen again. We need to work together for a more open, honest, fair, and accessible voting.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming. And then after your comments, we'll move to the Secretary of State, please.
Thank you, Ms. Cox.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm Donna Cox. I'm a resident and registered voter of Maricopa County for 30 years. That 6-lane thoroughfare that goes through Gilbert, Cooper Road is part of my family's heritage. Annie Cooper was my grandma. My zip code is 85210, and last week, the closest voting election was 4.4 miles away. I was one of the lucky ones. The thing is for the last 3 primary elections, my zip code was different. It was 85296, a much more affluent area. And the assigned voting location was always less than 1 mile away. It was just around the corner. This year at 1:30 p.m., the parking lot was completely full. All handicapped parking spaces were completely full. Cars were parked bumper to bumper on both sides of the street throughout the entire residential neighborhood. When I finally decided where I was going to park, I left with concern that I was going to get a parking ticket. For the elderly, the disabled, and for those with limited financial means, voting must be simple. This last election, as you see, it was not simple. Yes, it's true. The 30,000 square foot Escalante Community Center was designated as a voting location, but only one small conference room in that building was actually used for voting. In fact, there were more workers in that room than there were voters. I counted 9 workers in that small room. 2 of them stood at the door limiting access inside. And when I voted, there were 6 voting booths. But there were only 3 of us casting ballots. The other booths were empty.
Thank you for your testimony.
I think that kind those kind of comments are relevant. And it is interesting that you said you counted around 9, but we were hearing testimony that, roughly around 15 were supposed to be at each site. Appreciate that. But now I'd like to move to the Secretary of State.
Why are speakers being skipped? I signed in before Len Clark. Jeff
I signed in before Len Clark.
8 a.m. Why are speakers being skipped? Why is the activist community being
Yeah, we're activists. That's why you guys are letting us speak.
Why? I have a written presentation.
She made everybody else wait.
No.
We got skipped. And the same thing happening right here.
We're here
We
before
can't even
them.
raise our voices. We can't vote. We can't speak on it. Why is this happening? What are you doing?
Okay.
Let them speak.
Please, you need to be able to respect one another. I can't hear a conversation. I can't hear when you're talking over each other. We've heard public testimony, and I'd like to get to the Secretary of State.
You're skipping activists.
You're still down the line.
Yes, Representative Mesmer.
I am not skipping you. I am not
Where's
skipping
my name?
you.
My name is
I
Dave
don't
Dawson. Where is my name? I signed it close to 8 o'clock this morning with Jeff Woods. Where are our names?
Show us the list.
Madam Chair,
on the monitor.
for the sake of time, I'm not going to sit here and go back and search for all. We have.
Go down the list from the beginning.
We have gone through 10% of names. 10%. Okay, we're trying to get through them as quickly as possible. You can call me a liar if you like, if that makes you feel better, but it isn't true. I'm going down a list as it comes into my
Where
system.
does my name fall? I signed up before Len
Can you
Clark.
put that up on the screen?
Len Clark brought me here. Len Clark brought me here.
You were here right when Len Clark was here.
Yep.
Madam Chair, members in the audience, if you can call me out, we will work on getting it in the screen. We've never done that, but we'll explore that option. And I think we're going to go ahead and pass out slips. I'm going to ask the chair to request to speak slips just in case.
We
need confidence.
Let's move to the Secretary.
Good enough.
We're all up in November.
We're here because we had to wait.
Will you be going to the floor at 1:30 and abandoning this, or are we going to continue?
Right now, activists are being skipped.
Yes.
I'm waiting for the speaker to make that decision.
The secretary had her chance to
I
talk
can't
already.
make the decision.
She had more than enough time.
I can't make that decision.
They're taking it away.
I can't. Okay.
Who do you guys work for again?
That's right.
Terry, please,
The people.
the podium is yours.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Please resign. Please resign. Please resign.
Please respect. Thank you. Please respect.
Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak. For the record, Michelle Reagan, Secretary of State. And on behalf of election officials statewide, I would like to apologize profusely
You have done nothing. You have done nothing.
to the voters who are frustrated and angry with the election experience that they had last Tuesday.
Audience, we were going to respect every single person that comes up to the podium to testify. Please. Please continue. Secretary Reagan.
I also want to thank you for braving the long lines that you braved and for also being here today to share your story.
Yeah, we have to take off work.
I also want to thank the poll workers who worked incredibly long hours on Tuesday. I'm going to skip all of the comments that I had about what we've uncovered so far in working with the counties and some of the investigation that we've had so far. I went over that at 9:30. We will type up a report and have it available for your committee and for the public.
Thank you.
What I'd like to dive right into is that our office is not leaving anything off the table. And what I mean by that is that all election officials are in this together. And we at the Secretary of State's office want to take this as an opportunity to see what we too could have done better. And if there are things that we could fix or that we could do better, I want to know that so that we can see where we could perform better in the future. First of all, some of the things we found so far. One of our polling place locators online was not working consistently. We have 2 polling place sites. One is on the Secretary of State's website. One was on a third-party site called VoterView. That was not working. We are taking steps right now to make sure that is working by the May 17th election. I'm going to go through this really quickly. Again, I will have this typed up in a report for you. Second, if voters try to confirm their registration status on the site VoterView and they entered their driver's license number in lowercase, the system was hard-coded and it wouldn't accept lowercase letters. Completely unacceptable. I know that happened to some of the folks that are in the room today. Our vendor worked all night to fix that on Thursday night. Again, not timely for the election. We didn't discover it until after the election. We apologize for that. And we tested it this weekend. We'll be testing it again this week to make sure that that does not happen again. Third, for future elections, our office needs a dedicated phone line into all counties. This is something that was very hard to deal with on the day of the election. We took over 2,000 calls into our office on election day from frustrated voters. They don't call when they're happy on election day. Many of those we were able to serve. We pulled people from our accounting office, from our library division, and we were able to get as many of those calls handled as we could. However, a few needed to be routed into the county, and not just Maricopa County, by the way, other counties as well. And we got to get in the queue, get those voters in the queue along with everybody else. And we would like, and we will be working with getting dedicated phone lines into the counties. Fourth, as been mentioned, and we are aware of this, our election night reporting software on our front page shows a bar graph of the exact precincts that are being reported as they come in. That worked on the front page. However, if you were to, as a voter, go on to and break it down into the county level, you probably noticed where it said Maricopa County, 8 out of 8 precincts reported, 100%. Probably very frustrating if you were standing in line and had not cast a ballot yet.
Yes.
Probably.
In addition, you had the AP calling races. So you found out who was already projected to win and you were still hours away from walking into the polling site. I heard several people ask, why does this happen? Twofold. One is that the AP called the races. So I'm not going to take responsibility for that. I will take responsibility for the fact that our website said 100% precincts reporting. And that will be fixed. No, that is not why they called it. They called it because they were doing math.
Thank you, you guys have been doing much better, so that's great. That's
Going forward, I applaud you for having this meeting today, and we want to continue hearing directly from voters that were at the polls that day, because that is where we are getting, and we want to, that is where we're getting the best information that we're getting. We're going to be hosting a series of public meetings. We will be announcing the date and times of those meetings later this week. They will be bipartisan meetings. We expect those meetings to be one in the Maryvale area, one in South Phoenix, one in the Tempe, South Scottsdale area, and one in the Gilbert area, because these were the areas that were the hardest hit and had the most frustration.
19th Avenue and Greenway.
What about Phoenix?
Audience, thank you.
In addition, we have developed a mobile map geolocator where people will be able to, in the future, be able to see on their phone when they pull up what polling places are the closest to them. And we are looking at ways that we can be more aggressive at posting waiting times at polling places. It shouldn't be rocket science because it happens at admission locations. You're able to see the waiting times for admission locations now. And most important, I wanted to come and share with you today, we got up and running this weekend a website. On our website, you'll be able to access it 2 ways, and please, we do want you to take advantage of it. It's azsos.gov/my-election-story. And this is for people to contact the Secretary of State directly. Call us any name in the book you want. But I want to hear the frustrations you experience.
We prefer change the law. What are you going to do about it?
Obviously, we're frustrated.
The best way that we can change to make it better is to hear exactly what you experience.
No, we want you to resign.
You can also access that through the email myelectionstory@azsos.gov. As I mentioned, we've been in contact with over 2,000 voters. And that is where we're getting the majority of our best information so that we can make this better with all of the counties and make sure that this never happens to voters again. So with that, I'm able to answer many questions, and again, I thank you for your time. And I am going to stick around after this as long as I can so I can continue hearing from the people who showed up today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your commitment to this issue. Representative Representative Larkin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair. Madam Secretary?
What? We called every name, so everyone's fine.
Ms. Reagan. I think a very difficult thing for me right now, and there is a question here just to let the committee know, is you're saying that there's so much effort being put forth from your office into voter engagement and making sure we have a nice, clean process here in the state. However, we have SB 1516 coming to the Cal today, which is basically a dark money bill. How can you?
Madam Chair.
How can you?
To that point.
Today.
Mr. Larkin.
Listen, this is your forum, but we can't continue to have outbursts, otherwise you have to let Representative Mesnard, who has a to that point.
You're bad at interrupting. Madam Chair, the reason I'm interrupting is because...
Stop talking! Stop talking!
You're
allowed to interrupt, but we're not?
These conversations are just, these up here will be injecting politics into something. I'm here to listen to you all.
These are conversations that are never had or never listened to down here at this Capitol.
This issue, and you will listen to you.
This is a voter suppression matter, Mr. Mesnard.
This is your forum. Let's get through it. We have a lot of people who want to testify, and that's important. Senator Reagan said she wants to listen, as do all of we. We have to stay organized. Representative Larkin, excuse me. Did you have a question, and have you finished it?
Yes, I do have a question. My question was, how can the voters trust that the Secretary of State's office is acting in their best interest when we are pushing such policies like 1516 down here?
Secretary of State, great.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Larkin. 1516, we can debate it all day if you want, or...
Do it! Do it!
Just answer the question.
The most important provision of 1516 is the new ability in state law for us to go after these fly-by-night organizations. There is no provision currently in state law, and we're hoping that after this passes, there will be, to be able to, when they come out of compliance with the IRS, rules that they're supposed to be following. We will have a provision to go after them and force them to come into the Secretary of State's office and disclose their donors. Now, you and I can disagree with whether that language works or doesn't work. And you will have the time on the floor, when it comes to your floor, to debate that. That's what the legislature is about.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, and maybe this was a question for you, but Representative Carter had a good question about, I want to get back to that since I kind of put you on the back burner there. Can you speak to, is it a decision or is there statute relating to when an election is called? Is that?
And to that point, I received information in 16-551C, we cannot release information until 8 p.m. So,
yes, Madam Chair, Representative Carter, this actually came up on election night. We were sitting there saying, and quote, how can we release the election results when there's people still in line? And so what do? We look at statute. The Secretary of State's office is bound to follow the law as it's written. And so, in no event shall partial or complete tallies of the election board be released or divulged before all precincts have reported, or 1 hour after the closing of the polls on election day, whichever occurs first. So we said, okay, shall we send out a notice to all the counties to say, don't post anything on your websites? Because then the question became, what's to stop the counties from posting something on their websites? The press could go and add up everything from all 15 counties and get the same thing as if we hadn't posted anything. However, we lack the statutory authority to direct counties to do or not do that. So, we went ahead and posted it.
Representative Winter.
Yes, and just very quick, Madam Secretary, I appreciate that, and I'm definitely and am in favor of changing that somehow to give you the flexibility to.
And Madam Chair, Representative Winter, we will follow, obviously, whatever the legislature decides on that matter.
Thank you. And then offline, we don't have to get into this now, but I know that your office and the county and MVD, we have to get to the bottom of, is there a breakdown in that communication? Are people being disenfranchised because their registration status was changed? I've heard anecdotal evidence from both parties, and so we just have to get absolute clarity on that and what we have to do proactively going forward to make sure that never happens again. And I know you guys have been working hard on this too.
Madam Chair, Representative Wenninger, yes, we have been working on that extensively. In fact, this was something that I know happens, and I know it happened to people in this room. It's not hearsay. It happened to someone in my own office. One of my employees was registered as a particular party, went to go vote. I don't want to divulge his personal details, and it happened to him. So, we know it happened. We'll get to that in a second.
What are you going to do about it? Nullify and revote?
We worked with ADOT, MVD, all day Friday, and with the counties. This entire weekend, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, our elections team was doing cross-checking of paper voter registration forms to see, to try to pinpoint exactly which are the files that we believe were possibly affected. We do not have, obviously, a complete report or anywhere near a complete report on that. But what's most important right now to our office and to the county reporters is making sure that the people that cast provisional ballots or had to cast provisional ballots that those are among the first ones that are being cross-checked. Because if those were votes that should count, they need to be counted. So that is our priority right now.
External review.
This is kind of new information. Do we know, has this happened in previous elections, or is this a new occurrence? Maybe if you wanted to speak to that. Because this particular issue, I'm just kind of like the first I've heard of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, we've heard this. It appears that we've heard complaints of this before, but never to the level that we've heard it to this election. So we are going to be going back and investigating. Is this a new phenomenon? Was this something? Was a process changed recently that wasn't from before? Or was it, what exactly? Is it something that has been changed? Was it a process that was changed? Was it a system that was changed? Or was it just because there was more people that were switching and more interest in this presidential preference election? Those are questions that we cannot answer right now because our priority is making sure that we're concentrating and cross-checking on people's provisional ballots and those that cast provisionals first.
Way too late.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, Madam Chair, for coming down here to speak to us. I'm happy to see you at the Elections Committee. I've not seen you at the Elections Committee yet. So it's good to have you here. I have questions for you about budgeting. So in the 2016 budget, voted in 2015, it was appropriated $4.4 million for your office. When you take away the special programs you had for elections night reporting system, upgrading that, and campaign finance database, upgrading that, that totaled close to $600,000. And then your staff, that left $2.6 million for the PPE. Now the counties reported when we passed that budget last year that this amount of spending resulted in a cost shift for the counties, such that the counties, who are required to run this vote, had to find the money elsewhere. So as that budget was being passed, did the leadership of the House or Senate or the governor, did you talk to them about this, what amounted to a budget reduction for polling places?
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, Representative Clark. A couple of different points here to possibly unpack. First of all, I want to make it clear that the elections budget for our elections process at the Secretary of State's office is accounted differently and held differently than the elections funding that comes into the Secretary of State's office and then goes back out to the counties. So I just want to make that.
Can you explain how?
Well, what I'm saying is when you just said it was 4.4 million, that's a lot of that is just pass-through money where we receive it and we pass it on to the counties. So I just want to be very clear, our budget for what we consider election services at the Secretary of State's office is around 2.1 million to do what we consider our stuff.
Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, is that...
When you mentioned Madam Chair, the campaign finance program that we're working on and the things that are purely Secretary of State related, that comes out of our $2.1 million budget. And anything as far as running an election, that's money that the legislature gives to the Secretary of State's office and it goes right back out to the counties. It's kept completely separate.
Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, that's the elections line. The elections line item might have it.
Okay. Wanted to make sure we're talking about.
Yeah, election services line item.
Okay.
Which they show here 4.4 million total, and then you obviously back certain things out of that before some of that money goes down to the counties. But my question is, whether you look at the total 4.4 or the 2.1, was that a reduction from what you previously had or your predecessor had for the election services line item.
Madam Chair, Representative Clark, I believe it was the same as it was the year before. What I can, and I will double check on that, what I can offer you is what we discovered when I was first sworn in. And that is, we knew that there was going to be roughly a $9.6 million cost for the presidential preference election that, as we all know, comes around once every 4 years. And at that time, then Secretary of State Bennett did not get that into the budget prior to him leaving. So when I was sworn in 2015, we were looking at the current year budget that we were under, and we were kind of shocked because it should have been in there, because that money should have already been in the Secretary of State coffers to give to the counties. And the counties were worried at that time that that funding wasn't there. I came to the legislature at that time last session and met with the appropriation chairs and said, problem, the PPE for next year is not funded. It was funded for roughly $4 something million, but the rest of it wasn't funded. And everyone at that time acknowledged, yes, it was left out of last year's budget. I don't know what the reason for it was, oversight, or maybe, I can't answer to that. But you were all moving very quickly last year, which was great. And the budget was nearly complete. And so at that time, leadership in the House and in the Senate and the governor's office said, we recognize this. Thank you for bringing it up. We will make sure it is a priority the following session. To their credit, they have stuck by that. And that is why you saw your Speaker and Senate President Biggs, and for all indication, the governor's office has not made anything else but the understanding that he was fine with the fact that the counties are owed this additional roughly $6 million. And you saw those bills being sponsored by your leadership. So that's just the history on this, on the funding. Now, what that compared to in prior years, I can't answer that without that budget books right in front of me.
Madam Chair. So thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary. That helps me understand. Now you find yourself in the situation at the beginning of this year that you tried to get extra funding last year, or just not extra, the stuff that was needed. It didn't happen. Leadership said, we're going to get it for you. But help me understand why it was bundled in a bill that seems to me like two separate issues, bundled with a bill that basically said, if you want this money this year, you also have to vote for this bill that will deny all future funding for state-run PPEs. So the parties will have to pay for it. Now, where they get that money, we don't know. You supported that bill, you did not, did you? So, Madam Chair, why are we conflating the two issues when you should just be funding the PPE?
Madam Secretary.
Madam Chair, Representative Clark, the decision to do one bill or to do two bills is, sure, I can take responsibility for that. I prefer one bill because I thought it'd go quicker. At any time, the legislature could, it obviously didn't work that way. So, but you also are the legislature and could at any time do two bills or strip something out. I'm not going to point fingers and say it's your fault. You can say it's my fault. Regardless, I do stand by firmly in the belief, and again, with respect that you are the legislature, that if an election is gonna be funded by the taxpayers, then every voter should be allowed to participate. And to me, that was and is still the fundamental premise of that bill. And it's, we can disagree, we can twist it, you can say it one way, I can say it another way. But when I first ran that bill and pitched it, it was that this PPE is a completely different election than every other election that comes around every 4 years. And it is confusing. It is actually not even called a primary. Yeah, we all refer to it as a primary, and the media refers to it as a primary. I've called it a primary. It's not even by legal definition of primary. And we need to make the decision. My office, you, the legislature, the county elections, the board of supervisors, we need to make that fundamental decision. Is it going to be a primary or is it not? Yes. And if it's going to be a primary, then we need to start treating it like every other primary we treat in the state. And if it's not going to be a primary, then the taxpayers need to stop paying for it and the parties need to start picking up the tab. That is all I've ever been saying. Now you can choose to disagree with that. But that was what I proposed to the legislature for you to debate.
So, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, so you are in favor of allowing independents to vote in the primary, presidential preference primary, but you don't want the state to pay for it.
It's not what she said.
You wanted to defund the presidential preference primaries, right?
If an election is going to be funded by the taxpayers, every voter should be allowed to participate.
Okay, so Madam Chair, I had an amendment on the floor which said we will fund the presidential preference primary and allow independents to vote in it. My understanding from the debate on the floor was that we got word from your office to oppose the amendment.
Madam Chair, Representative Clark, I am not in the legislature and I am not the sponsor of those bills.
So, other questions then. Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, how much money out of your budget do you spend on public education of voting rights and our process?
Madam Chair, Representative Clark, as much as we possibly can siphon off.
So, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, do you have an idea? Can you tell me how much that is? I mean, any rough idea?
I can get that for you. Madam Chair, Representative Clark, one of the first things that I wanted to do when I became Secretary of State, and I have 2 of these people, I wish I could have 10 of them, is to start the program of voting rights ambassadors. And these are 2 individuals, one Republican, one Democrat, that go into communities. We focus on minority communities and young voting communities specifically, to explain to them, not just to register people to vote, that is good, but to specifically explain to them what are their rights as voters. Because that is so lacking. They do amazing work. If I could have 10 of them, I would. If I could have, as I said, I have 2 part-time people that do that right now. They were the only ones I could send out on election day to go and tell me what I'm doing, to go and tell us what was happening at the polls. So those are the only dedicated sources that we have right now that are for specifically for voter education. In addition, we did, and I'd be happy to share the results with you of this when we get it compiled in Canvas, and we haven't even attempted to do this yet.
Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, Madam Chair, some of this conversation we can have with the secretary when we don't have a whole group of people waiting here to speak.
Thank you.
I'd really like to go back to
Madam Chair,
I'm sorry, finish your comment.
Madam Chair, we've gone through 10% of the names.
We have a
We've
lot.
got to get through the rest of the folks who came down here, maybe taking off work. We're supposed to go to the floor, all that's still happening, so if we don't get back, then we're not going to get to hear from people.
We're going to recess fourth floor. I want to thank the secretary for coming down. I thought that was
It's not recessing now.
Recess.
No, we're not recessing now, but we're going to have to for floor. We're going to continue to pick up with those wishing to speak.
Madam Chair, to that point.
Madam Secretary, did you have any closing comments or anything you wanted to leave us with or finish a thought? It looks like.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to remind people, for the record, to visit my election story at azsos.gov.
The story's right here.
Well, keep in mind, not everyone was able to be here today, and we do want to hear from everyone what actually happened in the polling places that day, because that's where we're getting some really, really, really good information that we can base changes on. So thank you.
Madam Chair, is my line of questioning being shut down?
No, but we want to make sure we get to the point.
I absolutely understand that, but people want to know what happened at the Secretary of State's level.
They want to be engaged. I think you're right. Understanding and hearing about the experiences of the voters is going to be important when we craft and look at possible solutions. We have a limited amount of time. Again, I think the secretary, if you have,
If I have a closing comment, then
please do, because I'd like to get to the public testimony.
You know, Madam Chair, thank you, Madam Secretary, for answering my questions. You're right. People do want to know, and we want to hear from them. They also want to know and understand that in a state with an incredibly confusing primary system where you can vote on this state, but you can't vote on this state, why is it that the Secretary of State does not have a larger line item for educating the public? Why has the Secretary of State not been down here advocating for more funding from the legislature? I haven't heard about it in this budget year. I never saw it the last budget year. Why? I heard the Secretary of State say at her press conference that she does not have power to force the counties to put in more polling places, but you've got the power of the pulpit, and you were at a press conference the day before talking about what a great primary this was going to be. These are questions that I think we should be answering as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and yield.
Representative Clark, to go to the, it looks like town hall that the Secretary of State says she's going to be having, which is a wonderful opportunity to engage the public, and I know it's a bipartisan setup. So with that, we will move to, Secretary, thank you so much for coming this morning, and we will move to the next.
Madam Chair.
Representative Martin?
Yes, I just got a couple of text messages, and I don't know why it's so hard to plug in the audio and video cable into the television. However, I am being told that we are going out of order. I don't know if there's a system, something's going on with the system, but if there's perhaps a 14-year-old who could get an audio cable and but so just to let you know. And then also, so are we confirmed then that the Speaker's office or the Speaker himself will not postpone for public testimony for this committee?
We're going to have to.
I mean, have we asked them? Are we working with the Speaker's office? Because
Madam
we're
Chair,
talking
can you
about.
ask him to come down and explain why?
Sir, we can't have an announcement, otherwise you're going to have to. We're going to move to that. We're going to move to the next individual wishing to.
Madam Chair, I just asked a question, and I would like to see if we have an answer to that question. Are we working with the Speaker? Are we being proactive?
Yes.
Because we're talking about the voice of the voters right now. We have all day, quite frankly.
Let him talk.
Madam Chair, we're going to go to Jeff Woods.
Yeah, Jeff!
Yes, I do have video testimony. If you can please go to Phoenix Rising Media. Can you do that? Can you go to our Rising Phoenix Media on YouTube? Okay, so everyone here, please go to Rising Phoenix Media on YouTube. This has been documented. I got the beginning. I waited 6 hours and 15 minutes to vote. Okay, 45 minutes to park, 5.5 hours in line. We ordered pizza twice while waiting. Okay, everyone's calling out Michelle Regan and Helen Purcell, and that is totally justifiable. I want to call out one group in particular that should have known about this and alerted the public: the media, the mainstream corporate media here. Anyone covering elections would have known. In 2008 we had 400. Then we went with a uncontested Democratic primary in 2012 with 200 down to 60. It is your fault. You're supposed to be the fourth estate. You did not inform the public. No one knew about early voting. And I want to call the Arizona Democratic Party as well for not letting anyone know that there was early voting. Okay? If they knew there was going to be a problem, you know why they didn't tell anybody? Because they have their candidate already. Her name is Hillary Clinton. Okay? Changing all those names, okay? I know of at least 4,000 people, okay? There's been 4,000 confirmed people that had the registration changed. Everyone that I know that had the registration changed was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I want a federal investigation and a nonpartisan recount of this entire vote. We need another day of voting. Telling us to show up on Easter Sunday. There is supposed to be a separation of church and state. I expect you to rectify this issue. Thank you.
Guy Dawson.
Hi, my name is Dave Dawson.
Dave Dawson.
Just for me, it doesn't matter yet. My name is Dave Dawson.
Great, thanks for
I had 4 minutes written. I'm going to shorten it for you folks.
You need to do that.
Thank you for giving me permission. We the people know that our electoral process has been corrupted. This is not some sort of conspiracy theory. This is not some sort of sick joke, and this is perhaps especially true in Maricopa County. In 2012, the Spanish sample ballot in my district had the wrong date printed on the Spanish ballot and only on the Spanish ballot. In 2016, polling sites show clear division at McDowell Road. This is especially disturbing because until the late 1960s, people of color were not allowed to live north of McDowell Road. Voter suppression was blatant in Maricopa County. The racially and economically oriented placement of polling sites is disgraceful. I hope that all of you have taken the time to look at a map and see how few polling places were available in South and Southwest Phoenix, south of McDowell Road. The fraudulent fiasco dragged as the presidential primary on March 22nd, 2016 needs to be nullified, and constituents need to be allowed to vote. All who are not able to vote need to be recognized, and all votes need to be counted. Many petitions are currently circulating for an investigation of this atrocity and a revote on June 7th. Woo! Hundreds of thousands of signatures on over a dozen such petitions have been created. Let that implore you. All right, I spent 5 hours in line pandering to the elite while neglecting the poor is a recipe for corruption, and we are a living example right here, right now. The corruption has become so established that it got comfortable, so comfortable that it got lazy, so lazy that you got caught. We demand a revote on June 7th with an open primary. Current corruption needs to be held accountable. Now you know why they didn't want me to speak.
You had your 2 minutes. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank
the
you
next
so
individual
much.
wishing to speak. The next individual wishing to speak. And the faster we get through this, the more there's an opportunity for everybody to engage in this process, because I have to recess at 1. We have caucus. So listen, the next individual wishing to speak.
Madam Chair, the next individual, and
Yes. If you want to condense it so more of your colleagues can.
we have Joanne Woods, followed by Juan Cassian.
Okay, I'm Joanne Scott Woods.
Welcome.
I am an early ballot voter. How can I be assured my vote was counted? This voting period has us all questioning that. Please have a published number to confirm our early ballot votes as well as all of our votes as registered. I would also suggest that registered voters who have no record of voting in this election be sent mail-in ballots and also be given the option of going to a polling site during a 5-day window. Utah in 2008 had such a window. I do believe we need a statute of silence, as in this election and perhaps in previous, winners have been called at 1% based on the early ballots casted, which also discourages voting, even in long lines. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to Juan Cassian and then Mr. Gallardo is here. So.
All right.
Gallardo. For heaven's sake. You should know it. By heart.
Thank you very much. Is Juan here?
Let's go, Juan.
All right, Mr. Supervisor, would you like to speak?
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Sure, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Supervisor Steve Gallardo, Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, District 5. Let me start off by saying this, and this is something I hope the legislature takes into consideration, and that is the idea of having another day of voting. If the political will is there, it can be done. And that's a discussion that has to happen within the legislature, the governor's office. That is a discussion and something that should be done. If not, then I think if there's ever a challenge to the canvass of the election, this is a perfect example. This canvass has to be challenged and allow the courts to decide how to move forward, because the fact is this, because I was out there at most of these polling places. I drove around as many as I could. And there were a number of people that were disenfranchised. There were. Bottom line. They did everything they were supposed to do. They registered to vote on time. They looked up to find out where they needed to go. They showed up on time. Unfortunately, they were not able to make it all the way up to the polling booth for a number of reasons. That alone, and the number of folks that were in that situation, I believe qualifies for another day of voting. Folks, you listen to a lot of the issues that have been brought up forward right now. These aren't new issues. Many of these bills I've introduced myself sitting as a member of the legislature. I've introduced a bill back in 2008 dealing with independent voters on the presidential primary election. I've introduced it in 2013 to allow independents to participate in our presidential election. So this isn't anything new. A lot of the issues that have been brought forward have been bills introduced by current members of the legislature or in the past. So I think we need major overhaul of our election system. We do. We need to address the voter ID provision. It doesn't work. You just heard from some students right now, some students that have testified. We need to expand it to allow students the opportunity to utilize their student IDs in order to be able to vote. We need monumental changes when it comes to our election laws. So what we can learn from Tuesday is our election system is broken and we've got to fix it. And it comes from the legislature looking at policy. Now granted, there were some bad decisions made in the recorder's office. No one's going to adjust them. No one's going to say there wasn't. But we can learn from these mistakes and make sure in the past these never happen again.
Arno, thank you very much for that. That's the point of view.
Commissioner Gallardo, I watched the meeting that you guys had with County Board of Supervisors, and I heard listening. It was a voice vote, but it was you did bring up some questions and you questioned the six, but it was a unanimous vote by your board to go forward with this plan.
And I should have called the roll call, and that was the plan, was to call for a roll call. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, Representative, is to call for a roll call vote. But the discussion even started before that. We had brought up to the attention of the recorder's office that we did not have enough polling places. We needed additional polling places. My office was told, including myself, no, that was not going to happen. We were not going to bring in additional polling places. It was brought to the board that they were going to change, and they did. They changed the actual language on the agenda to say that it was these 60 polling places with the opening for additional polling places. We were told that they were going to have additional polling places. When the final list came out, those additional polling places were not there. When we inquired, both not only myself, but another district inquired, we were told that, oh, no. That's only for Propositions 1, 2, 3, the May 17th election. So were we misled? Yes. Should there have been additional polling places? Yes. I had discussions with the media. I've talked to many people in the media. I talked to the political party, the Democratic Party. I talked to several folks about this. This was a big problem. I talked about it on a radio station. This was a problem. We saw it coming. And unfortunately, this election continued to move forward. We can fix this. Okay. But it takes big changes, and it comes from the legislature as well. We need education funding. I was part of the HAVA committee back in 2004 after the Bush v. Gore election. We had $47 million. A good number of that went into voter education. How much money has the state paid in terms of educating the voter? Not a nickel. Nothing's been spent. So I think there's a lot we can do, and I look forward to working with the legislature to make sure that, one, that it never happens again, and two, that we have the laws in place to ensure that everyone has the constitutional right to vote.
I agree with you, and I look forward to working. I'll work with you personally on getting whatever problems we can get fixed. We have to be solutions-based, but with all due respect, to be specific, I mean, I listened. I turned the volume up a lot. There wasn't anybody who said no when they did the voice vote. So everybody supported. You did ask questions, and you were concerned about going down to 60. But you still vote in the affirmative. The second question I would ask is, and I think this pertains to it because of something held for South South. I think they should have advertised this earlier. But one thing of voter suppression I think that isn't being talked about is the fact that we had to attempt the election when hardly anybody's going to show up. They have Phoenix elections when nobody's going to show up in the spring. Chandler changed theirs to mimic all the other elections, and we went up 500%. We had 94,000 people vote in a general election for a mayor and council when 2 or 4 years earlier we had 12,000. To me, that's an issue of voter suppression. I would love to see you champion that kind of thing as well going forward.
And you just reaffirmed why Madam Chair, Representative, you have just reaffirmed why we need federal oversight over our elections in the state of Arizona. These polling places were made present representing getting part of the election. It's never been happening that way. This should have been done a long time ago. The county recorder's office should have went to the public and said, hey, what do you think of these lines? It never happened. There was never any type of public participation. So yes, do we need federal oversight? You bet. And these are all the problems. Why?
You took a huge turn on that.
No. Let's go back.
Federal oversight. Madam Chair, specifically, Dennis Welch back there on Politics Unplugged yesterday had 2 former mayors, Phoenix mayors on there, who started talking about voter suppression and about legislators they have a trained group of voters and they train them in this way and they don't want to go out. That's exactly what keeping the elections in the spring does for, and every Phoenix mayor has supported for the last few months. In fact, I think they took the state to court over changing the elections when everybody would vote up. They wouldn't have to take 4 times off in a year. They would show up when the president's being voted on and everything else. And what's everybody always say when they're defending it? Voter fatigue. They're not going to go down the ballot. They insult the voters, basically calling them that they're not intelligent enough to go down the ballot, and I know that they are. And that's the argument they use every time, and it's wrong, and it's empirical, irrefutable data. It says you will surge 2, 3, 4, 500% if it's done like that. And I just would love your support on working on that.
And Madam Chair, Representative, I can tell you that I haven't been a big supporter of consolidation day. I believe it's a local control issue. I think the cities and towns know what's in the best interest of their cities. When I was in the legislature, I wasn't a big fan. I stood with cities and towns and said, no, let them, they know their constituency, let them decide how they are going to conduct their elections. In terms of voter fatigue, We need voter education. Bottom line, we need voter education. We don't invest money into voter education. The state does, the state doesn't. And that was something I advocate all the time. When we had the $47 million in HAVA, a good portion of that money did exactly that. I'm not too sure if there's any money left over in HAVA or not, it's very little. But we need to invest in voter education to inform voters about what elections are done. And in regards to PPE, open the door. I've introduced a bill several times to include independents in presidential preference elections. You can do it. All it takes is a political will by this legislature to pass these types of policies. We can ensure this never happens.
As far as consolidated elections, you stand with the voter when you support consolidated elections, because as was just testified, turnout is 2, 3, 4 times the amount. That's what voters want. They want their voice heard. When we consolidate an election, you have turnout that supports that. One moment, sir. One moment, sir. We do want to make sure we get to everybody else in the audience, but I think there are some people here that do want to ask our county board supervisor some questions. Is that Representative Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Supervisor, you were in the room, and we had a quote from Ms. Purcell saying that it was signaled to her from the legislature that she had less money. And did she present it to you in this way? And did the Secretary of State in any way voice concerns to you about the number of polling places?
Money? No. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Clark. Money was never part of any discussion, at least at the county level. I think if it is the issue, then that's something that needs to be brought up. Because money should never determine the factor of anyone is eligible to vote. Money should never. The right to vote is so precious. It's so precious, and you heard it by so many speakers that money should never be part of it. So to answer your question, no, money was never part of the actual discussion. The second part of your question is I don't recall anyone from the state coming to the county saying 60 polling places are not enough. I brought up the issue a number of times before the vote, during the vote. We brought up that issue. And we'll continue to reflect on that.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Very quick. So, Madam Chair, Supervisor, you worked in elections long before you were ever even in office. If we were to consolidate elections, would you agree that we would also see an increase in turnout if we put the statewide elections, governor, secretary of state, in a presidential year?
Yes. I mean,
so consolidating, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. We should put them all in the same year.
Exactly. Madam Chair, Representative Clark, you bring up a good point. The reason for consolidation, let's be honest, is political. We really can, I mean, and you just pointed it out. If we really want consolidated, let's put everything on the ballot. But the fact is, politically, there's folks down here at the Capitol that would not stomach that. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you so much for coming. The next individual.
Madam Chair.
Do we have recess call?
Well, just for your knowledge.
So point of information, do we have recess call?
We will. One moment, sir.
We have a half hour.
Representative Larkin has the floor. We're going to go by protocol here, and we're going to respect everybody who's on the microphone. Representative Larkin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've continued to get a couple texts. I don't know what's going on, but I was wondering if the Vice Chair would allow Randy Perez, Samantha Charles, and Reverend Walton, who apparently signed in yesterday. I don't know. I just want to bring it to your attention. And
we want to hear them.
We all want to. If there's an outburst, then you're going to have to leave. We're going to respect everybody's time. Thank you so much for your notes.
Mr. Larkin, would you go through the names that you want to speak next, please?
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, I have Randy Perez, Samantha Petros, and Reverend Walton. I heard I have signed in since yesterday.
Randy Perez, Walton, and what was it there?
Petros.
Okay, we will follow Mr. Larkin's lead. We'll go to Mr. Perez.
And
I'll allow the Reverend to go first.
Yes.
Okay.
Then we'll do those, and then we will be recessing because we do have.
We have half an hour left.
We have caucus, which I'm told
it's more important than this.
So
is that more important than this?
It's a choice. It's not a choice that I can make.
We were told 2 minutes, and then
sir, would you please get it? Thank you so much for coming. Please.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of this body. I stand outraged because what I witnessed on Tuesday took me back to the 1950s when voter suppression was at an all-time high. It reminded me of the stories my grandmother would tell about living in Texas as a little girl when she wanted to exercise her rights as a young black woman in these United States of America, and that right was taken away from her. County Recorder Purcell, if you were a private citizen, you would have been terminated for your lack of malice. And this is what really made no sense. When the news reporter asked you, you laughed, as if the experiences of the people who had taken off of their jobs, which they pay taxes to pay your salary. It was as if it was of no consequence to you. You laughed. Almost like Marie Antoinette before the French Revolution when she said, let them eat cake. If you were a private citizen working for a privately owned company, you would have been terminated without hesitation. And then to come to testify before a joint meeting of the House and Senate, and do you realize the number of times that you said, I do not know, I'll get back to you. The people do not have the time to wait for you to get back to them. This is not a joke. This is not a game. The blood of the people's hands is on you. Therefore, we are asking the Department of Justice to come in. Not only are we asking the Department of Justice to come in, and I want us to all understand something. This is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter if you are elected. It does not matter who your person or candidate was. This was a travesty of justice and made us an international laughing stock. And last thing, I do understand. Last thing, for you to meet less than 24 hours later with someone and proclaim that the problem was solved, let me further note that this was a problem that you knew about, this was a problem that you could have handled, and I'm sorry, the buck stops with you. You should resign at the end of this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Megan. Amen. My name is Rick. You haven't started my time yet. You came up to the microphone. Well, I was at a point of clarification. I've been told that it's the rule that the chair can make a determination on whether she wants to continue this or not. That's been told the point of order.
Where is she? In the absence of the chair, I am the acting chair. I'm going to extend the same courtesy to you I have extended to everybody else, which is 2 minutes.
Where is she? My name is Randy Pavas, and I am a concerned citizen here in the state of Arizona. You know, someone brought this thing about, right now, I'm going to talk about criminal conduct. Because you all spent some time, you brought Ms. Osborne and Ms. Purcell to talk about fraud taking place in the state of Arizona. You talked about criminal conduct. You all made it a felony. If you help somebody, your neighbor, bring in a ballot, you are a felon if you successfully help them to vote. You tell me what is the crime now when we deny people the right to vote? Corporations not denied those people the right to vote. Right. It was under the color and authority of the county. Taxpayer dollars denied people the right to vote. It used to be called a poll tax. Yep. If you could recite Article 1, Section 2 of the Mississippi Constitution, you're denied the right to vote. Now it's called a time tax. If you couldn't put in a certain amount of time, you're denied your right to vote. So what is it? I challenge you all, if you can make it a crime for a citizen to help somebody vote and successfully help them to vote. Why can't you make it a crime when you deny 1,000 people the right to vote under the color of authority? And you ought to be thankful, Ms. Purcell, because if you were a Democrat, every elected Republican would come after you, you would resign.
Respect, Mr. Perez.
Excuse me? You want to talk about respect and you deny people the right to vote? Will you push that voter ballot? You want to talk about respect, sir? Will you turn it a crime to help someone vote? You want to talk about respect? You have no respect. Stop it!
I have been told that I have 30 more minutes. We can extend this 30 more minutes. And how the next 30 minutes is handled will be dictated by everybody in attendance. If we want to make it a productive 30 minutes, we can. We can continue testimony and get through as many people as possible. If there's disturbances, if there's outbursts, then I will end it right now and we won't be able to get as many other people to the podium. So I've been told, sir, you're proving and making my points. Thank you. Everyone who's Thank you. We want to make sure we get as many. I've got 30 more minutes. I've been told I have 30 more minutes that I'm able to extend this hearing. Then I would like to make sure I get as many people as possible. We're here and in it together. This is a public forum. Yes. Please finish.
That was 2 minutes.
No, I was I just want to say this, ma'am. You're asking us to trust the very same people that created this mess to come back in May and fix it? Are you out of your mind? At what point? What if it was 8 hours? You have to have a threshold. At what point does it become incompetence? You don't have to.
Your 2 minutes are done, and
then you're all going to own up and be real leaders.
Are over. We're getting the next individual. And remember, this next 30 minutes. All right, outburst. I need you to leave. Then let's make this next 30 minutes a productive one. We have one, Matt at the podium. Your 2 minutes starts now. Thank you so much.
My name is Samantha Mestras. I'm the executive director of the Arizona Advocacy Network. I think most of you know me very well. I've been here all year. And I commend you for having this committee. I think it's wonderful that we can hear from the Secretary of State, from the County Recorder. But I'm very deeply concerned that it's all for show and that nothing substantial will be done. And I have several reasons for that concern. One is that there's absolutely no reason why the floor cannot wait. I encourage everyone to contact Speaker Gowan. We're putting his information up on our Twitter handle, Arizona Advocacy, on Twitter, to urge him to push the floor back so that everyone here can speak today. Yes. I'm also deeply concerned because I have sat in this committee and I have heard a bill sponsored by the chairwoman, Ugenti Rita, that makes it a Class 6 felony to deliver someone's ballot for them. I can get up to a year in jail and $150,000 just for delivering someone's ballot, and that was sponsored by the chairwoman here today. It passed through this committee on Friday morning. So you're concerned about voters, but when that bill came through here, it did not appear that you were concerned about voters. Finally, there's a bill today that went through. I did not pass on Friday morning. Sorry. There was also a bill that's going to be heard today that completely rewrites campaign finance law. It will put special interest will be in charge of who we get elected. And it's very clear today that who we elect matters, from Secretary of State down to County Recorder. Voting is absolutely essential. And when we have money in politics, that is a barrier. They talked about it earlier. It's SB 1516. It's nearly 60 pages long. It has been shoved through this legislative session, and the Secretary of State is the one behind it who's been pushing it the entire time, although it was unfortunate she missed the committee hearing when it came through here. So I urge everyone to please, let's wait on the floor, and I would like to see some real action being done, because we have another election in 50 days, another one 5 months from now, and then one after that in 7.5 months. When a person does not have reasonable access to voting, they are being denied the right to vote. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Juan Cassian. Did we ever find him? I'm guessing not. Charles Carpenter is next, followed by Lisette Cole.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Charles Carpenter. Are we having fun?
Yeah.
This is why we can't have anything nice. My experience was that I arrived at the polling place on 42nd Street and Thomas Road, East Thomas Road, at a church. I arrived at 4 p.m., cast my vote at 9:30 p.m., and at that time, somebody had just come in, right as we were getting ready to check in, told us there were about 580 people in line behind us. And we had been listening to reports of Hillary Clinton and Donald, what's his name, being declared the winners, and it's disheartening. I don't know if any of you had that experience or had friends or family that had that experience, but it's incredibly disheartening. And I can kind of guess who the folks waiting in line were likely to be voting for.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys.
Bernie supporters.
It seems to me that it doesn't have to be this complicated. I might be missing something, but y'all working really hard to make this really complicated. Am I wrong? Yeah. It's complicated to me. Doesn't have to be.
And 30 seconds.
And I think that it's really important that A, everybody get heard, and B, we really take this seriously. I did. I stood there and waited. I wanted to go home. I was tired. I was hungry. My family was waiting for me at home. But I stood there and cast my vote. And I think a lot of other people did the same because they think it matters. And it should matter to everybody.
Many of us live in those same lines, so thank you very much, sir. Lisette Cole, followed by Andrew Cameron.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Lisette Cole. I'm a law student at Sandra Day O'Connor, ASU Law. I'm here to talk about 2 minutes of some of the misfortunate events that happened on March 22nd. From my friends and people on Facebook who are brave enough to share their stories, I wanted to tell you them. First thing, the lines were terribly long, people waiting from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 hours to vote. I had a friend who had to go to the polls 3 times. Once before work, couldn't vote, had to leave. Once before class, couldn't vote, had to leave. We got out of class at 5:50, and she went to go vote and stood in line until 9 o'clock. This was unreasonable, and this is wrong. Something went wrong in Arizona, and we should definitely be working to fix it.
It was deliberate.
Second, there were registered Democrats who did not receive their early ballots, who were on the list, on the permanent voting list, and had to go to the polls and vote on that day, adding more to the numbers that I think Helen Purcell did not count on. Finally, a friend went and drove around, talking about how there was open polling places. She drove around for an extra hour looking for one polling place in probably a couple mile radius that did not have a long line. So her and her young child, who was now 18, could vote, and they did not succeed in their mission. There was a systematic attempt to suppress voters in Arizona, and the government, our elected officials, need to be held responsible.
30 seconds.
We need to have open primaries, and honestly, we need to do a re-vote for this election.
I'm sorry. It was Andrew Cameron, followed by Deanna Licata. Rasmussen Licata.
I had prepared a joke, but I think we have heard enough jokes from Ms. Purcell and Ms. Reagan and this committee.
Yeah!
And I would like to ask you, how does it feel to be laughed at, Ms. Purcell? You were laughing at us on Tuesday, and you are laughing at us now behind that cold gaze you're staring me down. I registered to vote as a Republican. I was denied my right to vote. They gave me a fraudulent identification as party not declared. I have not changed my address in 10 years. I registered to vote on time. I was robbed of my vote. This is a serious crime. This is as serious as rape. This is as serious as murder, because this is the rape and murder of our democracy. And I demand that someone be held accountable. If not you, Ms. Purcell, then who? If not you, Ms. Reagan, then who? This is a high crime, and there must be punishment. If there is not punishment, then we do not live in a system of law. And I give up the balance of my time. Thank you.
Nina Rasmussen Nakata, followed by Robert Smith, and then Diane Post.
Want to say it one more time? Did you hear that, everybody?
Nina Rasmussen Nakata. Is that person here?
Okay, thank you
They're
for
coming.
coming. One
Followed
moment.
by Robert Smith, and then Diane Post.
Robert Smith from the Cure.
Did someone say Ms. Rasmussen Nakata was coming?
Just let anybody get up there, right? I have a prepared statement.
Okay, then we're going to go on to Mr. Robert Smith. Who's next? Is Robert Smith here? No. Diane Post.
Yeah.